Chapter 13, Jacob and Esau. God knows the end from the beginning. He knew before the birth of Jacob and Esau just what characters they would both develop. He knew that Esau would not have a heart to obey him. He answered the troubled prayer of Rebekah and informed her that she would have 2 children and the elder should serve the younger. He presented the future history of her 2 sons before her, that they would be 2 nations, the one greater than the other, and the elder should serve the younger. The firstborn was entitled to peculiar advantages and special privileges which belonged to no other members of the family. Isaac loved Esau better than Jacob because Esau provided him venison. He was pleased with his bold, courageous spirit manifested in hunting wild beasts. Jacob was the favorite son of his mother because his disposition was mild and better calculated to make his mother happy. Jacob had learned from his mother that what God had taught her, that the elder should serve the younger, and his youthful reasoning led him to conclude that this promise could not be fulfilled, while Esau had the privileges which were conferred on the firstborn. And when Esau came in from the field, faint with hunger, Jacob improved the opportunity to turn Esau's necessity to his own advantage and proposed to feed him with pottage if he would renounce all claim to his birthright. And Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. Esau took 2 idolatrous wives, which was a great grief to Isaac and Rebekah. Notwithstanding this, Isaac loved Esau better than Jacob. And when he thought that he was about to die, he requested Esau to prepare him meat that he might bless him before he died. Esau did not tell his father that he had sold his birthright to Jacob and confirmed it with an oath. Rebekah heard the words of Isaac, and she remembered the words of the Lord, "The elder shall serve the younger," and she knew that Esau had lightly regarded his birthright and sold it to Jacob. She persuaded Jacob to deceive his father, and by fraud received the blessing of his father, which she thought could not be obtained in any other way. Jacob was at first unwilling to practice this deception, but finally consented to his mother's plans. Rebekah was acquainted with Isaac's partiality for Esau and was satisfied that reasoning would not change his purpose. Instead of trusting in God, the disposer of events, she manifested her lack of faith by persuading Jacob to deceive his father. Jacob's course in this was not approbated by God. Rebekah and Jacob should have waited for God to bring about his own purposes in his own way and in his own time, instead of trying to bring about the foretold events by the aid of deception. If Esau had received the blessing of his father, which was bestowed upon the firstborn, his prosperity could have come from God alone, and he would have blessed him with prosperity or brought upon him adversity according to his course of action. If he should love and reverence God like righteous Abel, he would be accepted and blessed of God. If, like the wicked Cain, he had no respect for God nor for his commandments, but followed his own corrupt course, he would not receive a blessing from God, but would be rejected of God as was Cain. If Jacob's course should be righteous, if he should love and fear God, he would be blessed of God, and the prospering hand of God would be with him, even if he did not obtain the blessings and privileges generally bestowed upon the firstborn. Rebekah repented in bitterness for the wrong counsel which she gave to Jacob, for it was the means of separating him from her forever. He was compelled to flee for his life from the wrath of Esau, and his mother never saw his face again. Isaac lived many years after he gave Jacob the blessing, and was convinced by the course of Esau and Jacob that the blessing rightly belonged to Jacob. The circumstances of Esau's selling his birthright represents the unrighteous, who consider that the redemption purchased for them by Christ of little value, and sacrifice their heirship to heaven for perishable treasures. Many are controlled by their appetite, and rather than to deny an unhealthy appetite, will sacrifice high and valuable considerations. If one must be yielded the gratification of a depraved appetite, or the high and heavenly blessings which God promises only to the self-denying and God-fearing, the clamors of appetite, as in the case of Esau, will generally prevail. and for self-gratification, God in heaven will be virtually despised. Even professed Christians will use tea, coffee, snuff, tobacco, and spirits, all of which benumb the finer sensibilities of the soul. If you tell them they cannot have heaven in these hurtful indulgences, and that they should deny their appetites and cleanse themselves from all filthiness of the flesh and the spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of the Lord, they are offended, look sorrowful, and conclude that if the way is so straight that they cannot indulge in their gross appetites, they will not walk any longer in it. Especially will the corrupt passions control the mind of those who value heaven of so little worth. Health will be sacrificed, the mental faculties enfeebled, and heaven will be sold for these pleasures as Esau sold his birthright. Esau was a reckless person. He made a solemn oath that Jacob should have his birthright. This case is left on record as a warning to others. As Esau learned that Jacob had obtained the blessing which would have belonged to him had he not rashly sold it, he was greatly distressed. He repented of his rash act when it was too late to remedy the matter. Thus will it be with sinners in the day of God who have bartered away their heirship to heaven for selfish gratifications and hurtful lusts. They will then find no place for repentance, although they may seek it like Esau carefully and with tears. Jacob was not happy in his marriage relation, although his wives were sisters. He formed the marriage contract with Laban for his daughter Rachel, whom he loved. After he had served 7 years for Rachel, Laban deceived him and gave him Leah. When Jacob realized the deception that had been practiced upon him and that Leah had acted her part in deceiving him, he could not love Leah. Jacob wished to retain the faithful services of Jacob a greater length of time, therefore deceived him by giving him Leah instead of Rachel. Jacob reproved Laban for thus trifling with his affections in giving him Leah, whom he had not loved. Laban entreated Jacob not to put away Leah, for this was considered a great disgrace not only to the wife but to the whole family. Jacob was placed in a most trying position, but he decided to still retain Leah and also marry her sister. Leah was loved in a much less degree than Rachel. Laban was selfish in his dealings with Jacob. He only thought of advantaging himself by the faithful labors of Jacob. He would have left the artful Laban long before, but he was afraid of encountering Esau. He heard the complaint of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. Jacob was distressed. He knew not which way to turn. He carries his case to God and intercedes for direction from him. The Lord mercifully answers his distressed prayer. And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers, and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father. And your father hath deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. Jacob related to them the dream given him of God to leave Laban and go unto his kindred. Rachel and Leah expressed their dissatisfaction of their father's proceedings. As Jacob rehearsed his wrongs to them and proposed to leave Laban, Rachel and Leah said to Jacob, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. It was customary anciently for the bridegroom to pay a sum of money according to his circumstances to the father of his wife. If he had no money or anything of value, his labor was accepted for a stated length of time before he could obtain the daughter as his wife. This custom was considered a safeguard to the marriage contract. Fathers did not consider it safe to trust the happiness of their daughters to men who had not made sufficient provisions to take care of a family. If they had not ability to manage business, to acquire cattle or lands, they were afraid that their lives would be worthless. But that the truly worthy should not become discouraged, a provision was made to test the worth of those who had nothing of value to pay for a wife. They were permitted to labor for the father whose daughter they loved. Their labors were engaged for a certain length of time, regulated by the value of the dowry required for their daughter. In doing this, marriages were not hasty, and there was opportunity to test the depth of the affections of the suitor. If he was faithful in his services and was otherwise considered worthy, the daughter was given him as his wife. And generally all the dowry the father had received was given to his daughter at her marriage. What a contrast to the course now pursued by parents and children. There are many unhappy marriages because of so much haste. To unite their interests at the marriage altar by most solemn vows before God without previously weighing the matter and devoting time to sober reflection and earnest prayer. Many move from impulse. They have no thorough acquaintance with the dispositions of each other. They do not realize that the happiness of their whole life is at stake. If they move wrong in this matter and their marriage life proves unhappy, it cannot be taken back. If they find they are not calculated to make each other happy, they must endure it the best they can. In some instances, the husband proves to be too indolent to provide for a family, and his wife and children suffer. If the ability of such had been proved, as was a custom anciently before marriage, much misery would have been saved. In the case of Rachel and Leah, Laban selfishly kept the dowry which should have been given to them. They have reference to this when they say, "He has sold us and hath quite devoured also our money." In the absence of Laban, Jacob took his family and all that he had and left Laban. After he had pursued his journey 3 days, Laban learned that he had left him, and he was very angry. And he pursued after him, determined to bring him back by force. But the Lord had pity upon Jacob, and as Laban was about to overtake him, gave him a dream not to speak good or bad to Jacob. That is, he should not force him to return or urge him by flattering inducements. When Laban met Jacob, he inquired why he had stolen away unawares and carried away his daughters as captives taken with a sword. Laban tells him, "It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt, but the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad." Jacob then rehearsed to Laban the ungenerous course he had pursued toward him, that he had only studied his own advantage. He appeals to Laban as to the uprightness of his conduct while with him, and says, "That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes." A shepherd's life was one of diligence. He was obliged to watch his flocks day and night. Wild beasts were common, and often bold, and would do great injury to flocks of sheep and cattle that were not guarded by a faithful shepherd. Although Jacob had a number of servants to aid him in tending the flocks owned by himself and Laban, yet the responsibility of the whole matter rested upon him, and in some seasons of the year he was obliged to be with the flocks himself day and night, to protect them in the driest season of the year, that they should not perish with thirst, and in the coldest part of the season to save them from becoming chilled with a heavy night frost. Their flocks were also in danger of being stolen by unprincipled shepherds who wished to enrich themselves by stealing their neighbors' cattle. A shepherd's life was one of constant care. He was not qualified for a shepherd unless he was merciful and possessed courage and perseverance. Jacob was chief shepherd and had shepherds under him who were termed servants. The chief shepherd called these servants, to whom he instructed the care of the flock, to strict account if they were not found in a flourishing condition. If there were any of the cattle missing, the chief shepherd suffered the loss. The relation of Christ to his people is compared to a shepherd. He saw after the fall his sheep in a pitiable condition, exposed to sure destruction. He left the honors and glory of his father's house to become a shepherd, to save the miserable wandering sheep who were ready to perish. His winning voice was heard calling them to his fold, a safe and sure retreat from the hand of robbers, also a shelter from the scorching heat and a protection from the chilling blasts. His care was continually exercised for the good of his sheep. He strengthened the weak, nourished the suffering, and gathered the lambs of the flock in his arms and carried them in his bosom. His sheep love him. He goeth before his sheep, and they hear his voice and follow him. And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of the strangers. Christ says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. But he that is a hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth, and the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is a hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. Christ is the chief shepherd. He has entrusted the care of his flock to under-shepherds. He requires these shepherds to have the same interest for his sheep that he has ever manifested, and to ever feel the responsibility of the charge he has entrusted to them. Ministers who are called of God to labor in word and doctrine are Christ's shepherds. He has appointed them under himself to oversee and tend his flock. He has solemnly commanded these to be faithful shepherds, to feed the flock with diligence, to follow his example, to strengthen the weak, nourish the fainting, and to shield them from devouring beasts. He points them to his example of love for the sheep. To secure their deliverance, he laid down his life for them. If they imitate his self-denying example, the flock will prosper under their care. They will manifest a deeper interest than Jacob, who was a faithful shepherd over the sheep and cattle of Laban. They will be constantly laboring for the welfare of the flock. They will not be merely hirelings of whom Jesus speaks, who possess no particular interest in the sheep, who in time of danger or trial flee and leave the sheep. A shepherd who labors merely for the wages he obtains, cares only for himself, and is continually studying his own interest and ease instead of the welfare of his flock. Says Paul, feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being ensamples to the flock. Take heed therefore unto yourselves and to all the flock over which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers, to feed the church of God which he hath purchased with his own blood. All those professing to be shepherds, who feel that to minister in word and doctrine and bear the burdens and have the care which every faithful shepherd should have is a disagreeable task, are reproved by faithful Paul, not by constraint but willingly, not for filthy lucre but of a ready mind. All such unfaithful shepherds the chief shepherd would willingly release. The church of God is purchased with the blood of Christ, and every shepherd should realize that the sheep under their care cost a priceless sum. They should be diligent in their labor and persevering in their efforts to keep the flock in a healthy, flourishing condition. They should consider the sheep entrusted to their care of the highest value and realize that they will be called to render a strict account of their ministry. And if they are found faithful, they will receive a rich reward. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. Jacob says, Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God has seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. Laban then assures Jacob that he has an interest for his daughters and their children, and he could do them no harm. He proposes to make a covenant between them, and Laban said, Now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, Gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. Laban understood the wrong of polygamy, although it was alone through his artifice that Jacob had taken 2 wives. He well knew that it was the jealousy of Leah and Rachel that led them to give their maids to Jacob, which confused the family relation and increased the unhappiness of his daughters. And now, as his daughters are journeying at a great distance from him, and their interest is to be entirely separate from his own, he would guard as far as possible their happiness. Laban would not have Jacob bring still greater unhappiness upon himself and upon Leah and Rachel by taking other wives. And Laban said, The Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with thee. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. Jacob made a solemn covenant before the Lord that he would not take other wives. And Laban said to Jacob, Behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast between me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. As Jacob went on his way, the angels of God met him, and when he saw them, he said, This is God's host. He saw the angels of God in a dream, encamping round about him. Jacob sent a humble conciliatory message to his brother Esau, and the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and the camels into 2 bands, and said, If Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, Return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast shewed unto thy servant, for with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother and from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude.